Oh. Hey everyone, today I'll be reviewing the Criterion Collection's Blu-ray release of Michael Antonioni's 1964 film, Red Desert. This came out in 2010. It's Blu-ray only, one disc, region A. It is a new HD restoration, at least new at the time. And overall, the quality of the transfer was great. I did notice a few scenes here and there, a few shots here and there, I should say, where they were very, very soft, and it did look like it was actually just a bad transfer. But when I looked closely, I did notice that in some of these shots, other things in the frame were actually pretty sharp. Like one of them, they had some trees in the background, and it was kind of winter and barren, and the trees were very twiggy, and the branches were, and those were fairly sharp. So it made me wonder if maybe it was a focus issue with the original print, or original filming rather. And like usual, when in doubt, I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the Criterion Collection. Overall, no artifacts, no compression, nothing else that I noticed that would indicate or any like degradation or noise or anything like that. So like I said, like usual, I'm going to give Criterion the benefit of the doubt, and just maybe it was all the things that I noticed were just part of the original source material. The audio was uncompressed mono. It's Italian with English subtitles, and that is something I've really come to appreciate, and I never thought I would, but it does seem like, especially with these Criterion releases, when they use the original source format, in this case mono, that the audio just sounds fantastic. The struggles that I have sometimes with dialogue being a lot lower than music or sound effects or other audio in the picture or in the movie, that it's when they go from mono to a 5.1 remaster that they start messing with those levels and can't get them right, or can't get them right for enough home theaters. Thankfully, I have a decent center channel, and this sounds great in mono. I might prefer. I don't know for sure. I don't have a sample to listen to. I might prefer two-channel mono, so it comes out of my best two speakers, the left and right speakers. But still, this was still very good and very clear dialogue. Everything sounded great. As for the extras, there's an audio commentary by Italian film scholar David Forgax. I can't even pronounce the street names in my own neighborhood, so I'm really bad at pronouncing names. I don't know how he pronounces that. But it was okay. It got better as it went. It was maybe a little bit too much, maybe he had a little bit too much insight on the historical context of the film and how it played in Antonioni's filmography, and less about the film itself. And for my druthers, I'd much rather know more about the actual movie that I'm watching. And the historical stuff is good to a degree, but I get really geeked out about, lens choices, why they placed a light where they placed a light, how they got permission to shoot somewhere. I mean, all those things that are really behind the scenes that go into the making of the movie, to me, are a lot more interesting. That being said, it was still pretty good. They did have some extras, additional extras like interviews, essays, trailer to mini documentaries. Overall, it was not super impressive. Like I said, I'm particular about what grabs my interest, so I'm here for the movie, and if the extras don't blow me away, I'm fine with that. As for the movie, it's basically about a woman on the verge of a breakdown, an emotional breakdown, and we see her start disintegrating as the movie goes on, and it even opens up with her looking just a little bit troubled and out of place in this industrial, barren landscape in which she's found herself. Her husband runs this power plant, or this chemical plant, whatever it is, chemical manufacturing plant. And he's preoccupied with work, but he has a friend in town, played by Richard Harris, who's in town to do a deal with him. And the Richard Harris character strikes up a relationship with the Vitti character while she's clearly dealing with some emotional issues and having some struggles. On the face of it, and I think part of this was the kind of the dismissive diagnosis from her husband, in not so many words, basically is that she has PTSD from a horrific car wreck that happened prior to this movie taking place. But again, that should be taken with a grain of salt because he's as indifferent to her as he is to the environment around them that he's wrecking. Antonioni's focus is on the destruction of her and the destruction of the environment and how they're connected. In fact, her husband is taking some people on tour, including the Richard Harris character. And at one point, they laugh about not being able to eat locally sourced fish because it tastes like petrol. You know, ha ha ha. We can't eat from the water anymore. That's hilarious. And like I mentioned, from the very first shots where we see Monica Vitti wandering almost aimlessly through this landscape, Antonio's use of color is striking. The color palette is very, very muted, almost no color at all. They even went as far as to paint walls on the exterior, or paint the exterior walls of the village that they're near to kind of take away all the color. They painted a food cart. They're in a hotel room later on, and everything in the hotel room is white or gray. I mean, everything is. It's really astonishing how Antonioni takes total control of the color palette, especially since this was apparently his first color picture. They even burned the grass outside and painted it to remove any last vestiges of color, which is kind of ironic for a film that is really centered around the destruction of the environment and how industrialization is ruining our environment. But the ideas he expresses and introduces early on, he carries all the way through. The visuals are all about industry versus nature. In every shot, there's a chimney or some kind of metal or smokestacks. Even if we're inside and there's a window looking outside, maybe at the canal that's going right behind their house or behind the factory, this whole area, there's always a ship in the canal. There's just, and it's like right on top of them. There's kind of no escape from it. In their house, the upstairs, they have this blue metal railing that would honestly look more at home in a factory or in the chemical plant than in a house. The kids' toys, they seem to kind of predate me, but they look to me more like erector set type toys than like Legos or building blocks. Again, this is 1964. But even so, even his toys or those had this sort of mechanical industrial look to them, and other things that he had were robotic. It's really just a pervasive theme, this industrialization throughout the movie. At one point, they're walking around on the deck of a ship, and they're having this, Vitti and Richard Harris, and they're having this fairly intimate conversation, and the way that it's blocked, they're kind of walking amongst these like ladders and chimneys on this deck of the ship, these other things, and at this point, I might have just been reading too much into it, but it seemed more like this is the kind of scene that would be filmed where they're walking amongst trees and kind of finding, connecting with each other through that. And it seemed really out of place to be having this conversation on this deck the way that they were. The score also contributes to this, and it's got this electronic synth sound. It may predate synthesizers. I don't know. Again, my musical history is not up to date. I feel like those kind of were more in the later 60s or the 70s. So they might have just recorded machinery, but the score sounds like machinery. It sounds like industry. And it contributes to the overall effect. We're surrounded by this. And I think that also carries through to the Monica Vitti character. She's also surrounded by this. I think that is, and I'll touch more about this in a little bit, but I think that really is the root of her problems, that she is surrounded by machinery, not life, not color, nothing. And I think it's really affected her emotional well-being. There's this fascinating central sequence where Vitti and Harris meet up with another group of people, and they end up in a shack. And they're at this kind of like this sexually charged party that it doesn't break out into an orgy. It seems like it's about to at every beat. But what I found fascinating, not only from just the way that everybody interacts with each other, but at a thematic level, it's cold, it's winter, and there's just one little furnace in this shack. And they literally start breaking off boards from the walls of the shack to put into the furnace to use as firewood. I mean, they're actually tearing down their shelter to build comfort for themselves. And that really seemed to speak to the themes that Antonioni was going for in this. Later on, there's a dream sequence when their child is sick, or maybe is perceived to be sick. He might also be showing the early signs of having emotional, mental issues that she's having, maybe for the same reasons. But this dream sequence, it takes place on a beach, and it shows a girl who's stranded on the beach. But here, the color is spectacular. I mean, the ocean is crystal clear, free of any pollutants. The sky is a beautiful, beautiful blue. The sand is golden. I mean, the color is just gorgeous. And among other things, what it does is it brings stark contrast to the barren landscape, the real world that she lives in. And you can't help make that comparison, because we come back from the dream back into her real world. And it's like, oh God, like that was nice for a minute to see some color. Again, all of this creates an effect of building on her emotional isolation. By the end, we realize that the car wreck probably isn't at the root of her angst, but living among the destruction and lack of life around her has a lot more to do with it. The whole way through, I thought she was the personification of Mother Nature, because her slide mirrors what Antonioni is showing with the decay of the planet and what her husband is doing to the environment. But maybe it's more literal. Maybe this is just his version, or he's telling us this will be us in the future if we don't take care of our planet, and how vital nature is to our emotional well-being. And either way, it's all very effective and at making us very upset to watch her go through what she's going through. The performances were great. Monica Vitti is just fantastic. The torment that she's going through, it just seems so real the entire way, and I was really captivated by that. Richard Harris was really good too. It's just kind of funny because my only real knowledge of him, I feel like I should have more knowledge of him. But what I know him from is really Unforgiven, and I had to keep taking double takes and triple takes and quadruple takes to really see if this was the same Richard Harris, because I could not reconcile the two, compared to Unforgiven especially. But he's big, and he's healthy, and he's strong looking and young. That definitely helps. But compared to Unforgiven, I was like, this can't be the same guy. So I just thought that was kind of an amusing side point to this. Overall, and I know that my personal bias is showing here a little bit because I do care about the environment, but for me, this is a solid 10 out of 10. It was absolutely beautiful to watch, despite the lack of color, but I was mesmerized by Antonioni's control of color and use of color and lack thereof. Monica Vitti was amazing, and I was truly affected by watching what was happening to her. If you like this video, please feel free to give it a like. If you like the content that I produce, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can do the notification thing to know when I drop a new one. If you have something to say, hit the comments and I'll try to reply to everybody. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.